With that, I'm going to invite our next speaker, Mr. Rohan Parikh. He's been waiting very patiently, and he's clocked in from Italy as he's there. He's the managing director of the Green Acres Academy. And under him, we have 3 schools. We have 4 schools, and they are in Mumbai and Pune. And over to you, Mr. Parikh, to share your ideas. Thank you so much for your patience and being with us.
Thank you. I have my live test subject for our online education with me. Thank you. I'm just going to share a small presentation. Seema, is it okay if I share?
Yes, definitely. Yes.
Screen?
Yes.
Okay. Is the presentation visible now?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So thank you, everyone. I actually quite enjoyed going last because I got to hear a pretty diverse and intelligent set of opinions. And also, the approach I took for this forum was that I'm presenting our findings on the science behind online learning. So we had a lot of very experienced opinions on the matter. And the approach we kind of take at the Acres Foundation is to constantly go back to scientific research to synthesize that. And then our real function is to use that research and contextualize it into the Indian context, into the Mumbai context, into the Pune context, because the research is all global. I think my panelists have, to a large extent, covered a lot of what I would have said in any case. So I'm going to have to change a little bit of what I'm saying. I think the one comment here kind of sparked a little bit of controversy, and I'll address that right away, when Dr. Jain, whose group of schools I've been following and have a great amount of respect for, talked about us not being able to deliver education online. I both agree and disagree with that comment. Education, yes, is a very, very broad field, very, very broad set of things. It includes face time with teachers. It includes the little fights you get into during snack break. It includes the social learning that comes with that. It includes running in a playground, of course. So we will never be able to deliver the entire gamut of education online. Having said that, and as someone who holds a master's degree via online, in which I studied neuroscience of learning, we can definitely deliver more than engagement online, and even to the grades 1 to 5. And I think, as someone mentioned, a huge amount of mental development happens at that age. So to just completely say that online cannot work then would be doing a great disservice to our kids. And I will kind of back that up with the evidence. So let me try and get this slide working. Oops. Yeah, okay. It's moved to my next slide, right? Seema, just wanted to check.
Yes.
Okay. So just really quickly, there's been a lot of policy confusion on online learning, not just in Maharashtra, not just in India, but everywhere. It's been an issue for everyone. And the fundamental issue, according to us, is that, and according to most educators, is that policy is being made without any empirical evidence being taken into account. So policy is being made on conjecture, on opinion, but not on science. So what we did was we took a synthesis of 14 peer-reviewed studies, which basically comprised almost 200 peer-reviewed published papers in leading journals between 1973 and 2020. And if you add up all the studies, there's almost 3.5 million children that were part of the study. So this was a pretty solid bunch of research that we took. Sorry, this just before I get into this, just really quick story about Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. As you guys might know, Socrates, the Greek philosopher, his pupil was Plato. Plato's pupil was Aristotle. These form the foundations of Western philosophy. Writing in Greece for the Greeks was invented during Socrates' lifetime. Socrates was famous for discourses, and he believed that all learning has to happen inside the head. So you have to internalize huge amounts of information and debate it and discuss it. That's how you learn. He never wrote a single of his philosophies down because he believed that writing was inferior to learning by heart. Plato grew up when writing was becoming and adapting as a new technology, just like online is today. And when Aristotle came about, writing was the norm. So everything that Aristotle came up with was written. So there was always fear of new technology. There's always this feeling that the way we did it before was correct. That's not necessarily right. These are just a few of a list of all the research that we read through in order to come to the conclusions I'm going to present. And if anybody wants access to the list of studies, we'll be happy to share them. You can contact Seema on that. So first thing to understand, very, very important, is that there's two types of screen time. There's passive, which is watching TV, watching YouTube, watching non-engaging content, watching Peppa Pig for those who suffered through that like I have. And that active content. Active content is when you're engaging the student with educational content. If we take the analogy to the written reading, Amitav Ghosh's latest book is not the same as reading Filmfare magazine. Right? It's very, very different. So online, technology, computers, they're just a medium. The content and the engagement is our responsibility. So if we give trash, we will not expect anything. If we give something engaging, we can get something out of it, just like in print, just like in verbal. These are just mediums. What we found from these studies was a lot of them were riddled with issues and limitations. Very few of them were able to segregate active and passive learning. And despite this, not a single study actually proves that there is any impact on the well-being of children through screen time. I have used the word screen time to represent online learning just because that was the catchphrase in the newspapers. So number one, none of these studies have been able to prove anything negative between screen time and the well-being of children. Second, when the studies actually segregated active screen time, it was shown that there were positive associations with academic and cognitive performance. So this is, again, scientific experiments with controls and experiment groups. And there's clear scientific evidence to show that screen time with active screen time has positive impacts. The third surprising point is there's actually, again, no medical evidence to show that screen time affects sight or vision or myopia, which was interesting. And the final thing was passive screen time. Again, passive screen time, while it might be a waste of time, there's again been no study to show that any negative impact on the children. What it does show is that it has a negative impact when it replaces activities like sleep, exercise, or socializing. So if parents are using an iPad as a babysitter and just letting their kids watch the iPad all day and not exercise and not eat and not sleep properly, of course there's going to be problems. This is a personal point of mine which I studied during my master's at Johns Hopkins, where my focus was on the neuroscience of learning. And there is a lot of research, and I wrote a paper on this, on actually how video games are not always as bad as everyone says they are. And there have been many studies to show that they have positive impacts on several skills, such as critical thinking, problem solving, reflexes, gross motor and fine motor skills. So when we just lump screen time as something bad, we might be throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So that's just a rapid summary of what we found when we went through all the available research. And what was our conclusion? Our conclusion was that active digital content can be powerful if used correctly. Now, obviously, everything in life has a big if, and this is where I agree with Dr. Jain that you cannot just say you're delivering education by putting stuff online. Delivering education requires a lot more than that. Screen time needs to be regulated in order to ensure the content is engaging and enriching. It cannot interfere with other activities like sleep, exercise, socialization. These may seem obvious, but they're not always, they unfortunately aren't always obvious. So what did we do? I think Mr. Rohan Bhatt, my namesake, talked about this at the start of this session, where he said, digital is not a substitute for offline. It doesn't mean you can just take your classes and make them digital and deliver the same lecture. It's a completely different beast. So it requires its own strategy, it requires its own curriculum, and it's not a substitute. It should be used to transform learning. I think it was Mr. Bhatt, or I forget who this was, but someone also touched upon that there is an issue with devices. So before we started what we call our school at home, we surveyed our parents and found that 80% of homes share a device. So it became very, very important to have all our, and about 70% were mobile first without laptops. So we had to have content that was mobile friendly, and we needed flexibility in terms of time. Someone used the word asynchronous. So we needed to have more and more asynchronous content so that, when mother or father are not working, they can hand their device to their kid and the kid can take the lessons. So this was something else we had to ensure. And we did a lot of parent engagement to ensure that parents understood that screen time cannot replace exercise, social life, sleep, socializing with the teachers, socializing with their friends online during lockdown is still very, very important. And then obviously the heart of the matter was the content. So again, we curated, researched, and vetted the content to make it as engaging and enriching as possible. In terms of strategies, I think enough opinions have been shared about the policies. I don't need to talk further about that. But the policy talked about online teaching being restricted. So we've kept live sessions going still on a purely optional basis because several children needed that live session to answer questions and ask questions. So we've kept live sessions as optional and for review if children want, and all other content is available online in an asynchronous manner. This is just an unfortunate example of how we need to adjust around not properly thought through regulations. So, the major goal here, and this is where engagement, enrichment comes in, is that we cannot afford for students to lose the learning which they've had over the last year. So our first goal was consolidation and prevention of learning loss. And now as we get into the new year, we've had to get into more and more content that creates new learning. And that has definitely been more challenging than trying to prevent learning loss. So that was my short presentation. I hope I was on time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rohan, for sharing your thoughts. And I think the kind of things that you brought about in terms of the research that you've done helps us understand the various fears that school have to address with the parents and the students in terms of what really works for them. So your findings, obviously, as a research, can be used by any school to tell the parents and tell their and kind of soothe their anxieties on what is causing harm to them. So that is very, very relevant. Thank you so much for sharing those findings with